Hi there. In this video we're going to look at extracting rows from a table in Power Query. In the last video we learned how to extract a single column if we wanted to get all of the total sales or all of the values here in category. In this one we're going to be looking at what if we want to extract not an entire column but a single row, like say this row right here or this row right here. So let's go ahead and get started. We are in extracting table elements.xlsx. We're in the first row sheet. I'm going to click here on this particular table. It's already got a query associated with it, the query grab first row query. If you don't see the pane, you can come up here to the Power Query tab, click on Show Pane, and I'm going to right click and hit Edit. Okay, so just to review, last time, same sort of deal. Let's go to the advanced editor here. We've currently got two steps. The first one grabs the source step, grabs the information from the table back in Excel, and the second one, right now, all it does is grab whatever the first step is. So it doesn't do anything to it, it's just pointing exactly to the first step. So if we wanted to extract just the column, what we would do is we would click here, and instead of pointing to just source, the previous step, we point to a specific part of source, the total sales part in square brackets, and then we would get a list that's just the total sales column. Okay, but we don't want to do that. That's how we would get a column. We want to get a row. So if we want to get a row, instead of square braces, we use curly braces, right? So we use two curly braces, and what goes in the curly braces determines which row we get. Now you might be thinking to yourself, if I want row 1, what I would do is I would put a 1 in here, and that would be logical and make sense. However, here in Power Query, it's M is what's called zero indexed, and what that means is when you're looking at items in a list, such as rows in a table, it actually starts not at 1 but at 0. So the first row is actually row 0. So if I click, I'm going to click enter in just a second. Keep in mind the first row is coffee small, all that stuff right there. I'm going to click OK. Now it's kind of shaped a little bit differently. This is called a record, by the way. If you remember last time when we extracted a column, we got a list, and when you extract a row, you get a record. But if we click over here and we look at the first row, well, product ID equals 1, name equals coffee small, category is beverage, subcategory is coffee, and total sales is that right there. We get the exact same thing, just kind of rotated. Okay, so that is how you extract a single row. So let's go ahead. I'm going to discard and close. Let's head to the next sheet. We're going to grab the third row. This goes about like you might expect. I'm going to click on the table, head over to Query Grab Third Row, right click and hit Edit. Okay, same deal as before. Source just gets the data, and output right now just points at source. But we don't want source, we want the third row. Well, if we wanted the first row, it wouldn't be row 1, it would be row 0, like that. This is how we get the first row, right? Let me uncheck that. Well, we want the third row, and so there's sort of two ways you can do it. When you're starting out, what you might want to do is you can do, I guess it would be whatever row you want. So we want the third row, and then just subtract 1 from it, and that's how you get what you want. So if you want the first row, you just get 1 minus 1, which turns out to be 0, and you get row 1. Or you could say, you know what we want is row 3, and we subtract 1, and we end up with everything from row 3. So if I click here, row 3 is coffee large, 442.38. So we get coffee large, 442.38. So this is indeed the third row. Okay, and that works just fine. And that's a fine way to do it. It sort of makes it nice and explicit what you're trying to do. As you get better at this, so when you first start doing this whole zero index thing is a little weird to think about. As you get better, you'll just end up entering the number and know exactly what you're talking about. So when we say source 2, we know we want the third row. Okay, so I'm going to head back to File, Discard and Close. And now we're going to get the last row. Okay, so I'm here. I'm going to go to last row. Right click over here for grab last row. Click Edit. And this one is a little bit trickier. So grabbing the first row is easy. It's just row 0 in curly braces like that. Boom, there you go. That works just fine. Backspace, 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 enter. So what if you want the last row? Well, I mean, if you happen to know that it's 20, you could just do 20 minus 1. And, I mean, that technically is the last row in this particular table, but what if you don't know how many rows you're going to have? Then it gets a little more complicated. So we're going to have to do something a little bit fancier. So what we're going to do is, let me go ahead and start by doing this. So we're going to start here. We're going to get a row, and well, what row number do we want? Well, we're going to do a table.row count, open parentheses, and type in source and close parentheses. And we're going to subtract 1 from it. So what this is going to do is the outer part wants to grab a row from this table here, from the source table. The inner part says, okay, go to the source table, count how many rows are in it. All right, well, there's 20 rows, and subtract 1. So this is going to end up being 19, right? So if I click enter, I get the last row. And this is nice because if suddenly there's like more rows in it, like suddenly there's 22 rows, well then this formula, the table.row count, will be 22. It'll subtract 1 and get, the row index of 21 and grab it correctly. So it would always be grabbing the very last row. Okay, again, this stuff seems like sort of not abstract, but not practical. It's going to come in handy later on, but for now, it's pretty important that you at least sort of are introduced to it. So I hope that gives you a nice sort of impression of how you can go ahead and grab records here in Power Query. Thanks for watching. I will see you next video.